Evictions have been a key issue since before the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2013, a year that saw the deaths of nearly 700 individuals experiencing homelessness, Toronto City Council voted against having more shelter beds for its unhoused population. A study on the deaths of unhoused individuals by the city showed that since 2017, the average number of deaths per week has increased over the years. In 2019, when the number of homeless deaths reached 128, Mayor John Tory voted against declaring Toronto's homeless and housing crisis a state of emergency. The city issued bylaws banning individuals from living or camping in parks after midnight. And in addressing the show of criticism towards the city, a protest was held on December 19, 2020, that began at Trinity Bellwoods Park and made its way down to Old City Hall. Protesters called for an end to encampment evictions and a better system for addressing the needs of those on the streets.
This crisis is beyond COVID. This is a poverty crisis. And the pandemic has only made the already present crisis worse. 38 of Toronto's houseless population identify as Indigenous, and 31 of Toronto's houseless population identify as Black. In this city, low-income neighborhoods, which are often compromised of Black and Indigenous peoples, are disproportionately impacted, not just by COVID-19, but also are disproportionately affected by poverty and the housing crisis that plagues the city. The city of Toronto has about 6,000 shelter spaces. However, the city themselves acknowledge that these spaces, including the drop-in respite shelters, are all operating at capacity most nights. Shame!
Because of inaction and apathy on part of the government. Human beings not being given the basic human right of housing, 4 walls and a roof over their head, food in their stomachs, clothes on their backs, the basic necessities. They're being deprived of that. And when they do find ways to get it, when they do find ways to achieve it through their own means, what they've worked for is then torn apart by violence workers, police. They tear down the encampments, and that's honestly the worst thing you can do to a homeless person, because you're tripping them up as they're trying to find stability.
And these are our demands. Number 1, invest in actually affordable housing, obtain vacant buildings and convert into housing, create 10,000 units of rent-geared to income housing in the next 24 months. Number 2, immediately enforce an eviction moratorium. Number 3, immediately end the criminalization of encampments and issue a moratorium on clearing encampments. Number 4, all shelter and supportive housing sites must be user-friendly and include robust overdose prevention and harm reduction services. Number 5, until there's enough permanent, safe, dignified, and affordable housing, immediately ensure enough emergency shelters. That means 2,000 more rooms as winter continues. Number 6, and final, immediately provide winter survival gear for those in encampments. And if we don't get it...
I was unhoused for about a week and a half, sleeping on park benches and such. And honestly, I had it a little easier because it was in the summer, so the nights weren't as cold. But I was just, after hearing about a lot of the injustices that were happening in the city right now, like, them tearing down the encampments and such, kicking people out of their spaces, the bureaucracy that took place by all these long wait times for people to actually be admitted into shelters, and when they were admitted, their mental health and their physical health was not taken into account. Some people, they don't do well in these enclosed spaces. They're just mentally, they're just not there yet. But I realized that I actually had it a little easier because it was warm out, and I just see how cold it is out here, and to have so much apathy as to where the government is instructing the police to go and tear down these people's lives and just leave them out in the cold to fend for themselves. It's abhorrent. It's absolutely abhorrent. And how could one stay aside and do nothing about that?
It's going to very much remain the same unless the people change, right? I think everyone's waiting for their white savior, being the politicians. The politicians won't save you. The police won't save you. Only you can save yourself and your community, right? You've asked them to change. They're not going to change. We've made several petitions. Emailing John Tory, calling him, is not going to do anything whatsoever, unfortunately. He knows what the issues are. They know exactly what's happening. It's time for you and all of us to step up into the plate and do the things the politicians aren't doing, right? You have these complaints, not act on them.
All I just ask is just acknowledge me. If you see me crying or, if I'm hurt, don't just like walk by me as if I don't exist. I was raised to treat people the way I want to be treated back, and that's just respect. So look for back, and that really hurts me inside. And a lot of people, especially when, I'm sitting here and I'm crying and stuff like that, it's disgusting to see how many people will walk by me and not even come and ask me if I'm okay. You don't know what that person is going through until you've walked through it. And it's like, sometimes I tell people, it's like, I'd like for one person in this city to walk a mile in my shoes or go a couple weeks in my shoes and see how it feels.
These politicians, they love to talk about how knowledgeable they are. They love to talk about listening. They say they're listening to experts. We are the experts in poverty. We are the experts in precarious housing.
And they enforce these rules. The police, they enforce these rules. They carry out these disgusting actions that displace people. And, it's honestly just a threat of violence. So yeah, these things work in tandem. They're definitely intertwined. You can't tackle one without tackling the other, so we tackle them both. That's why they were infused in our chants.
I feel devastated at Tent City. It's been going on for the last couple of years now, and this last summer, I'd seen more tents along the beach than I ever have in my life. I have never seen that many tents in the city. I used to come around here as a kid with my parents, and, you'd barely ever seen homeless people out here, let alone tents everywhere. Now you look in every park and every alleyway, and there's either a box or a tent or some kind of shelter system set up. I have lived in a tent once. It was over the summer, fortunately, so it wasn't all that bad, but it does get cold in the mornings, even in the summertime.
Yeah, do you want to tell me?
3 to 7 o'clock in the morning, you can see your breath in the morning.
Do you want to tell me about that? What is it like waking up in a tent in the middle of downtown?
Waking up my experience is sleeping in a cold truck. It's like a tent. It's drastic. You start winding down at night, and normally you want to sit in your chair and you want to relax and watch some TV. You're sitting there watching a window.
Yeah.
Get cold.
And when you
when your body heat starts filling up the cab and it starts getting to the point where it's below zero now, you start to realize it. Your feet start to get cold, then you feel like you wet yourself, but you didn't. And your legs start to swell up because of your body heat. And then you just start getting really cold. And that's the time about where you fall asleep. And then when you wake up, you're beyond cold. It's time to go for a walk now. You get up, you change your socks maybe, you put some hot air into your hands, make sure you warm up your hands, maybe change your shirt, go for your morning washroom break, and then go out for a walk and hope to God that you can warm up. If you don't warm up, you go to the hospital.
Anyways, I don't agree with it because they're building more condos, which they don't need to be built. They're putting more money out of a budget into things that really don't need to be put there. It's like they should be focusing more on the homeless people. I'm sorry, because, there's too many of us, and it's pretty disgusting if you ask me.
Is the police over?
We know that this is not safe and inadequate. This is not a safe and adequate option for the encampment residents. They're at risk of contracting COVID-19 in these shelter spaces. Displacing people during a global pandemic is an extreme public health concern. Shame! With every interaction of the state with encampments, we know encampment residents and their supporters are being deliberately put at higher risk of contracting COVID-19. The government and TPS continue to ignore our calls, petitions, and demands. This struggle is one that must work in tandem with defund the police, with abolish the state, with land back. Black liberation and indigenous sovereignty must be at the forefront of this fight. The criminalization of encampments is environmental racism happening in the urban. Those living in encampments deserve dignity and livelihood. Encampment residents and all houseless peoples deserve access to their structural and social determinants of health.
About that, performative activism is a cancer. it kills the legitimacy about these actions, because what revolutionary action truly is, the spirit of it, it gets severely dampened, suppressed when people wear it as a little shiny badge so they can show it off to their friends. When they use it for clout, personal gain, and all these selfish self-interests, it stifles progress. They become part of the problem. So when people do that, I just find it truly utterly revolting. So I can't by any means stand by that.
You know, it's so common, and what we're often having to find is if we want anything done, even the most basic things in Toronto, it's always going to be us pushing it. Always such a small minority of people carrying these things financially and socially, and it's draining. It's extremely frustrating and tiring, and everyone's always looking for someone else to act, but we need their support. So if that support's going to stay online, you can continue living this internet fantasy, right? And I'm going to come out in the streets and actually change lives. But it's going to get to a point we're going to need those people regardless, because it's the majority.
Right.
They are the majority. It's not like I can just disregard them, unfortunately, because if I could, these streets would be packed. But we need them. That's why it's so empty today. So I don't want them to continue doing that, because if they continue doing that, we're going to continue to have these same issues.
We got people out here that have had jobs pretty much all of their life, have had money all of their life and stability all of their life, who are now putting people who haven't had that all of their life out on the street now because they're already scraping by. Now you're going to put those people that are scraping by out on the street because they can't provide a life for themselves properly? Why? Because our government gives a fuck about the rich people and not about the poor people? It's been like that for the last 30 years. I've grown up in poverty. I've seen it. I've lived it. I know it. For me to stand here and speak about it is nothing.
The people in power, they have the power to stop this, yet they choose not to. I don't know if that's gross negligence or if it's just complete apathy. Either way, the people in power right now, they need to be stopped. They're not going to stop themselves, so we got to do something.
Thank you so much for this.